Welcome to The Last Word on Product Marketing, a podcast hosted by Liza Cichowski, founder of Last Word Marketing. Liza helps MarTech and ad tech companies align product strategy with marketing execution. On her podcast, Liza and her guests talk about how to avoid pitfalls and achieve success in product marketing.
Welcome to another episode of the Last Word on Product Marketing podcast. I'm Liza Cichowski, a fractional product marketer and consultant with Last Word Marketing and the host of this podcast. I'm joined today by Matt Engstrom, who is Vice President of Marketing at Digital Remedy, which connects the right data with the highest performing media to bring brands greater impact, increase consumer actions, and fuel powerful TV campaigns. Before Digital Remedy, Matt worked at startups and scale-ups like MIQ, Integral Ad Science, and Teads. So he certainly has a lot of ad tech and video advertising experience. He now lives in New York City, and I'm so grateful to him for coming on the podcast. Welcome to you, Matt.
Thank you so much, Liza. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's start off by talking about Digital Remedy. I obviously am familiar with it and have looked a lot at your website. And I see that this is a product marketing podcast and Digital Remedy has a lot of products. I'd love to hear about some of the challenges you face when you're aligning product marketing goals with the corporate strategy when there's such a robust suite of products. How do you prioritize in you and your team's day-to-day execution?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As you mentioned, we do have a lot of offerings. I think the most important thing is really understanding the customer need, because that can kind of help guide not just what you're promoting in market, but how you're packaging things together. Digital Remedy is very much solutions oriented, which means we do have a lot of these individual capabilities and products, but it's really how they fit together in unique ways that address unique client challenges that's where the magic happens. So, whether they're mostly interested in CTV advertising or they're looking for a performance omni-channel approach, we really take their needs into account when we're designing our messaging that we take to market. So it really starts with understanding our customer audience segments. Brand marketers have different interests and needs versus, agency media professionals. So it's really understanding the customer needs and then being able to package things in a way that actually address challenges versus us pushing products first. And that kind of guides us in terms of how we want to package those together and how we really want to position based on those needs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that your clients face that they tell you they need your help with?
Yeah, so we work a lot with full service agencies. We partner with them basically to extend their resources. We're almost an extension of their team a lot of the time in the way that we come in and we help them build up digital capabilities and tap into the power of CTV. We find there's like a few major challenges that they're facing. One is, and I think it's pretty common across all industries, but simply resource constraints, because there's, they service their own brands and obviously have their own client roster with their own unique challenges. And a lot of that can be competitive and internally for an agency. So they really need to think about resource prioritization. And when you think about like the digital media ecosystem, which is really where Digital Remedy plays, like there are so many capabilities, there are so many partnerships out there. So, a lot of times it's like, where do you begin? Like, how do you start to build up this digital tech stack to be able to provide that service and that value for your clients? So I think that's one, is really being able to sort of scale that, because you need to think about media quality. You need to think about the right channels, measurement, optimization. And if you sort of look at that by like partnering with, point solution companies individually, that can get quite costly. Sometimes those solutions aren't interoperable. So, that challenge is one that we are very much poised to solve for, because we're almost a connection point within the industry that brings a lot of these capabilities together in a single easy access point that agencies can tap into. So that's one big thing. Another thing that we always hear about is just, and I think this is like a challenge as old as time in terms of like advertising, but it's really being able to not only drive performance, but measure performance in a way that can actually suggest future strategies for driving performance. So not just like what happened, but like what media should be attributed, what publishers, channels, creatives, all of that are contributing to your overall performance. And how do I understand that in a way that helps me optimize my current strategy and inform my future strategy? And that's another big one we hear is it's hard to connect data. It's hard to build one media plan that sort of effectively uses each channel as it should be. And Digital Remedy, like I said, we're poised to be able to help with that too.
Great. So what has worked well to address some of those challenges, and what hasn't worked so well? I would imagine that clients really love that it's kind of a one-stop shop. I know that a lot of agencies lament having to log into 15 different systems to get different services accomplished. So it sounds like that's definitely one of your kind of value propositions. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. I think, one way that we are really able to kind of address those challenges uniquely, as you said it, we're sort of like kind of that single access point. So that resonates really well. We really are focused on solving challenges. Like when we're talking to clients, we don't come in and lead with products and features and list all of the things we do. Because like you mentioned, that can become overwhelming because we do provide a lot in terms of media. But what we'll generally do is sit down and understand, like, okay, you might have resource constraints or there's barriers currently that you're facing in terms of being able to drive the performance that you want for your clients. So we can basically come in and understand a little bit more about those challenges. So we ask a lot of questions, where are these barriers coming from? Is it a human resourcing issue? Is it that you need to build up your tech stack more? Do you feel like you don't have transparency in your data? And before we even start pitching or talking about it, we really understand what that need is so that we can talk about the solution in a way that specifically addresses that. We found that works a lot better than when we just kind of like enter the market or we're talking to a client and just shout about features and products. Everybody is doing that. And it's also like, well, what does that mean for me? Or how is that different? And I think that's really one area that resonates. The other is just providing transparency in terms of like what actually is driving performance. And we don't do it in a way where we hold on to all the data and kind of keep it to ourselves. We like to empower clients to be able to actually look at their own campaigns and understand what's driving those results. So it's really a matter of like kind of finding the right interoperable stack to be able to deliver more for our clients, but also positioning it in a way that resonates with them and actually addresses real challenges that they're facing.
Interesting. Do you find that you position yourselves differently when talking to brands versus agencies, brand direct versus agencies? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I mean, there's actually a lot of similarities because essentially both are interested in driving high performing, transparent media, generating measurable ROI. Like those are things that media agencies care about so they can deliver for their clients, but also obviously things that are top of mind for marketers as well. But the nuances come really within sort of like that service level. So agencies are really, obviously running this media on behalf of clients and ensuring that basically we're hitting their goals. When we talk directly to marketers, it's a lot about like, okay, we want to understand, for especially performance marketers, if we're investing $1, we want $1.50 back, and we want to understand exactly what's driving that. It becomes a lot more about ROI. It becomes a lot more about performance marketing, and finding the right media mix to be able to achieve those goals. And we work with a variety of brands as well. Somebody in the travel industry is going to have like a different set of goals than say somebody in CPG. So when you're working with marketers too, it's like you almost have to become an expert in a way in terms of like how media works and can deliver value for these different verticals. Agencies are kind of in the same boat in that case because they're also doing same. Some of them specialize in certain industries. A lot of them don't. A lot of them have clients that sit across different verticals. And so for them to be able to be effective at that, they really have to understand their clients' businesses. And especially when you come to different industries that say like finance or gaming or healthcare, there's a lot of regulation in terms of like what you can and can't say, where you can and can't advertise, the data you can and can't use. And you need to have a partner that's able to understand those things to be able to run effective campaigns within the framework of those nuances. And so I think that's a little bit different as well. When we're talking to marketers, agencies are very much like focused on like, how do we drive value for our clients? How do we provide this excellent service? And as I mentioned, a lot of times for agencies, we actually function as an extension of their team to help them expand their resources, but also simply just deliver better, higher performing digital media for their clients as well.
Okay, that's interesting. That there is a different way of speaking to these different audiences, even though they are almost on the same side.
It is. Yeah, it is for sure.
Um, so zooming out a little bit in terms of that differentiation in the market, there's a lot of companies that are playing in the same, I was going to say pond, but it's really the same ocean that you're playing
Very
in.
much so. Yeah.
And you've worked at some of those companies. So it sounds like you have a lot of different competitors. How do you differentiate yourselves among all of those different players?
Yeah. I think part of what makes this so challenging is the ad tech ecosystem has matured as an industry. It's weird to think about sometimes because I've spent most of my career in ad tech, and it's always been sort of like, the next wave of advertising or the frontier. But the frontier now is essentially where most people are spending ad dollars. And so competition has become a little bit different. It used to be about, tech innovation, consolidation, new capabilities, new bidding capabilities, all of that. I'm not saying it's all table stakes because there still is a lot of innovation happening in the industry, but a lot of those things are pretty standard practices from an operational standpoint. So to get to your question, I think it's a couple things. I think it's understanding some of the innovative trends that are happening, because a lot of times ad tech follows the forefront of these. I know this is not a podcast about AI and everybody is talking about it, but I do have to kind of mention it. As soon as everybody started talking about it, obviously the industry was jumping on board. How do we figure out ways to be able to integrate this into our own stacks and drive value for clients? And I think this is where the opportunity to differentiate can really open up, because a lot of companies talk about AI, but like they're really just doing machine learning or something like that. And it's not really generative AI. It's not AI in the sense that we're using it now. So I think the companies, even within that context, are the ones that understand the technology, but are deploying it in ways that are true to what it is, but also address their clients' challenges specifically. So, we're using it and thinking about it in specific, interesting ways that align with things like how we provide greater reporting and transparency to clients. So how does it really help us do what we do best for our own clients and continue to elevate there? I think that brings me to my second point, which is, you can either differentiate by being different, offering something completely net new, or you can differentiate by simply doing something better than everyone else in the industry. And I really think that second area is where we play, whether it's AI or the service that we provide. We really put our customer at the forefront. And I think we're just well positioned to do that. I mean, 70% of our company is employed in a service position. That's because we want to be able to deploy those solutions effectively to address our client needs.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I could push you a little further on talking about differentiation. You mentioned the ways in which you go about differentiating and how it sounds like you've done a lot of the messaging work there, which is fantastic. Then how do you go to market with that? There's a lot of, as you well know, there's a lot of companies that we do AI better and we have better white glove service and we have these stats to prove it. But I think companies that are able to really take that messaging and put it in the market in more meaningful ways are the ones that are more successful when they promote themselves, say, on multiple platforms, in multiple forums. They have a really tight message that they're repeating over and over again. I know that you recently released a study that definitely supported some of your differentiation points. So maybe you could talk about how you go to market with your differentiation messaging.
Yeah, I love that one because it's definitely a really big challenge. I think we always start by understanding our audiences. And so we've done a lot of work over the last year to not just understand, the broad differences between, say, agencies and brands or whatnot, but really understanding, what the attributes are of our audience that make for an ideal customer for us. Where can we drive the most value? So it's looking at, revenue internally. It's understanding, again, their challenges specifically, what technology they have access to, what they don't. And then in terms of advertising to them, like what events are they going to? Where are they looking for information online? How are they receiving that information? Who at the agency should we be targeting from a persona perspective? So there's a lot of different data collection that we do before we even launch something, just to make sure that we know as much about that audience as possible. So even within, our agency audience, we know differences between those that tend to be a little bit larger or tend to service multiple verticals versus those that tend to be a little bit more niche, and what the needs of those are. So I think that's one thing. I would say the second thing, when you're messaging, like you had mentioned, everybody is saying, "Oh, our AI is the best. You should trust it." It's people don't have trust when they first connect with you. You have to build that trust over time. Part of that is leading with benefits so that they understand what it is that we're offering that actually helps them do their jobs better, helps their company bring in ROI, helps them deliver for their own clients. So rather than leading with features, we tend to lead with benefits in our messaging and try to incorporate a lot into that. You mentioned that we had released a study that's like based off of a lot of conversations that we've had with agencies. And even that within it, you'll see outlines a lot of the benefits up front of kind of like what a partnership in media can look like and how it can help power agencies forward. The last thing is testing and learning. So we have some assumptions about where people find information online, where ads engage, how we should be using email, but we're constantly trying new things. For example, the study we released, we decided to do it entirely digital, entirely ungated. And that's because we wanted to make sure that we're just getting people interacting with us and building that trust through this content that offers them some value as well. Somebody internally asked us, "Why are you doing this campaign again this year? You did it last year." And the answer is, we got really good results, so we're going to do it again. But there's other things sometimes that fall flat, and that happens, and we move away from those strategies and deploy new ones. And so I think there's always this element of learning and sort of adjusting. And I know that's not always easy, but even little adjustments on the fly in terms of like copy or where we should be running or who we should be targeting, little tweaks here and there over time lead up to like a big ROI gains for sure.
That's great. That was a really good outline and a mini blueprint I think people can follow
Well,
for
good.
how you can translate your messaging into a go-to-market plan. So the next phase of go-to-market is working with the sales team, right? And getting them to buy in to your messaging and aligning the marketing and product and sales teams around goals and priorities. How have you been able to persuade the sales team to use all the messaging and materials you've created for them? What are some of the challenges you've come up against? You mentioned that, you do get questioned on why are we doing this campaign again? I know that I get a lot of questions from clients about should we gate or should we not gate? I
Yeah.
personally feel that gating is very 5 years ago. And now it's all about a value exchange between you and your audience and building that trust. And I think trust starts at home, right? So you
100%.
have to get the sales team to trust you before you're going to get the market to trust you. Can you talk a little more about how you've approached that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think our biggest challenges with sales is always making sure that the marketing efforts align with sales efforts. I've worked in some companies where that's been a little bit less effective. You kind of have sales and in market doing their own thing, talking about their own thing, and then marketing is a separate strategy, and there's no real bridge there. And that creates a situation where sales is always wondering, well, what's marketing doing and why are they doing those things? If I'm out talking about this, why are they messaging about that? Or why isn't there more integration there? And that definitely erodes trust. I found that it starts with leadership alignment, really. I have a really good relationship with our CRO at Digital Remedy. We spend, time every single week talking about sales and marketing priorities and how we can better align our strategies together. They have a list of high priority clients that they want to go, or targets that they're going after. That's also our list of high priority clients that we're going after. So we operate off of the same target list and the same audiences as well. But that all starts with kind of building a strategy at the top that aligns both together. We're on the same commercial team here. And we do a lot of work to connect our team to the entire business through communication, whether it's training or town halls or open office hours, things like that. We try different ways to communicate to see what resonates. It doesn't always land really well. We try one thing, like whether it's an office hour. Sometimes if it's not after a big product launch, salespeople don't show up because they're busy and they may not have any questions. So it's like, why are we doing that? And one thing that we found actually works really well, it is a bit time consuming, but recommend it, is just throwing 15 minutes on each seller's calendar. My product marketing director has been doing an excellent job of that this quarter. And she's basically been doing 15-minute quick interviews with each seller, understanding who are they up against in market, why are they winning, why are they not winning? And then we deploy that information in our own strategy to help us understand how we should message, how we should competitively conquest. And then the last piece of that is just knowledge sharing with the sales team. So we make sure that we're on sales calls at least once a month, usually a lot more frequently. For example, we're looking at doing more of an ABM approach this year. So we've been spending a lot of time understanding our ICP, our clients, how we can talk to these different accounts. We took time and walked the sales team through the entire strategy, beginning to end. This is why we're doing it. This is how it works. And this is how we're going to work together. But again, it's also things like if you have a meeting every month to catch up with sales about something and it's not well attended or the conversation isn't really going well, take some time and ask why and try to figure out a different approach. So it's kind of, again, that testing and learning mentality, but it's also making sure that you connect your strategy at the top and then make sure you're giving each other transparency into what you're doing and why throughout the process.
Yeah, getting curious is often a good solution to solving a lot of problems, I think.
Yeah.
Being curious about people and their motivations. You've talked a lot about working with the sales team, but what about the product team in this process? How have you been able to improve or, just have a great relationship with them as well?
Yeah. So essentially the way that we enable product to be able to build more effective solutions in market is by connecting them more closely with the sales team. Some of it happens organically outside of marketing. So there's a direct line of communication there. Marketing doesn't always need to be the middle person in that situation. But what we do is make sure that we have a go-to-market framework that incorporates that as well, that we're getting feedback on things that we're releasing. We're getting feedback on our solutions in market. We'll even do research or insights to get into what are they looking to achieve in the upcoming year, that kind of thing. And that also helps the product team as well. And then it's operationalizing the roadmap in an effective way too. So sitting down with the product leads and understanding what we're building and then what the potential market impact would be so that we're effectively commercializing that to sales. I think it's also important for the product marketing team to understand exactly what's going on in product. And I know that sounds silly, but I have seen product marketing teams sit a bit siloed from product, and they tend to become more almost like sales enablement functions where it's like, let's build materials or build us this deck or create us this case study. For product marketing, I think to function as it should, it needs to have a foot in the product team. It needs to understand development cycles, how resources are being deployed, how decisioning is done so it can help inform their own go-to-market. And so we have a framework we use that essentially incorporates a lot of those elements together.
What are some of the elements of the framework? Did you make it up when you came into this position so that it's very kind of customized to Digital Remedy, or is it something that you have used in your previous positions?
It's a little bit of both, actually. Yeah, it's a really good question. So essentially, we kind of break out our framework based on launch phases and what we need to achieve for each. Like, what do we need for operational readiness before we even start the go-to-market? Who do we need to communicate with? Do we understand the product well enough? Do we understand the benefits? Do we understand the client impact? So there's sort of this fundamental groundwork that we do at the beginning. There's a framework around communication at each phase. So while we're getting ready for launch, ensuring that we're connecting with the product team, getting ready for trainings, operationalizing all of that. And then there's sort of like a launch phase internally where it's internal communication, what trainings are required, what materials are required. Once that's done, then it's go time for the external launch, which is broken up into different advertising channels, event opportunities, things like that. The product marketing team is in charge of managing that framework. And obviously they work very heavily on the messaging and the strategy. but they'll work very closely. And I think this is important too, and we haven't talked about it yet, but making sure that product marketing is very integrated into the larger marketing team because, for example, our demand gen team is going to be the one that's actually executing a lot of that messaging in market when it comes to like advertising, email, et cetera. So the framework is really designed to facilitate communication and collaboration.
Great. Thanks for outlining that. I think that's really helpful. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to learn a little more about Matt.
You've spent over 20 years in corporate, and now you've stepped off the hamster wheel to run your own show as a fractional executive. Whether you're flying solo, leading a small firm, or running a boutique, Maven is your fast track to earning over $500,000 annually, and potentially more, without the grueling corporate hours. This is your shot at the freedom, flexibility, and independence you've worked so hard to achieve. By infusing your intellectual property into all aspects of your revenue generation, Maven transcends the limitations of other sales and marketing approaches. You'll have a pipeline so full that prospects who truly value what you bring to the table will be the ones knocking on your door. You'll work directly with Jay and Taz, who've led the way for over 30 years, helping countless executives make this leap. Contact j.kingley at fractionalmaven.com. Spots are limited, so act now to build the business and life you deserve.
Welcome back. We're talking to Matt Engstrom, who is VP of Marketing at Digital Remedy. So, Matt, let's hear a little more about your career journey. What is a pivotal moment in your career that shaped the way you approach leadership and decision making? I know that when I first started speaking with you, you mentioned that this was your first position where you're running all of marketing.
It is.
Which is a big leap. So congrats to you. How's that going? And what led you to want to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about leadership all day. It's funny for me. Like I wouldn't say that I was like born as a natural leader. I'm a little bit more introverted naturally, and I think early on in my career, a little bit more shy. I think it's hard to say that there was like a pivotal moment that changed for me. I think I had a mentor early on in my career. This is not somebody that was doing something that I wanted to do one day. He wasn't in the industry I wanted to work in, but he'd had a lot of experience and just knew a lot about leadership and management and how to conduct yourself professionally and how to, have the right conversations. And very early on in my career, I would just go sit in his office for 2 hours and just talk to him. And I learned a lot about like leadership principles and ways to think about things before I even had the opportunity to deploy them. So kind of laid a lot of groundwork for me. So I think one big thing is just having access to somebody who has been really successful at that and cares about it, to be able to start kind of helping you think about how you might be able to apply that to some of your own leadership. And then it's just really been growing and observing what works and what doesn't. Like, to be frank, I've had amazing managers. I've had managers that have been a little bit more challenging. And I always ask myself, like, what makes that difference? And I think the big thing for me that makes a huge difference there is that the managers that view management and leadership as inherently part of their job and responsibility are a lot more effective than those that are like, okay, well, I have a new direct report. I have my job. I'm just going to kind of manage what they're doing. But like, really, it's my core job. Like, no, when you have a team or even one report, that becomes fundamental to your own role and your own responsibility. The ones that viewed like their own accountability being attached to their ability to lead the team were a lot more effective. And then I think like the maybe one aha moment for me was just kind of acknowledging and embracing my own leadership styles. And everybody was taking those personality tests in the office. Yeah. I think they can be good or bad, but this one actually did lead me to thinking about things a little bit differently in the sense of like my leadership style. And I didn't even think about it this way really until I took this test. Is very much like I view winning as a team as important. I like making decisions as a team. Obviously, as a leader, you do have to call the shots. But as much as I can get input from people who probably know more about what we're talking about than I do because they're in the weeds every day, like shouting wins as a team, taking responsibility for setbacks as a team. Like I'm very much like a team-oriented team lead, cheerleader type of leader. And I've learned how to lean into that a lot more.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say that to be a great leader, you should care more.
It sounds so silly when you say it that way, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think it's silly at all. I think clearly not enough people see it that way, right? Like,
Yeah.
or care more about yourself, right?
Yeah.
That understand we are all connected, whether it's at work or in the world, we're all connected, and you won't go wrong by just caring more. So I think that's actually a really astute and keen observation. And then in terms of the personality tests, I think they're kind of fun to take, but I think a lot of them have been disproven as effective for the company. But I think you make an interesting point that maybe even though they were intended to help your employer understand where you belong in the company, it can be a helpful exercise to understand where you believe you belong in the company or, in your career. And sometimes we do need a little bit of structure to kind of get out of our own heads and think about your strengths and weaknesses. And it's a little intimidating to sit down and think about, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses?
Not always easy.
If you take a test, or so to speak, or a quiz.
Yeah. And even in this case, it was just like getting my mind going like, oh, actually, that does make sense. Like I am more like that. And then maybe these are things I can kind of like lean into a little bit more, it's really helped me kind of develop my own leadership skills. And it's always a learning process. Management is really hard. And I don't think people acknowledge that enough. And that's why, again, to your point around caring, I think that's actually really important because you have to put in that work and you can't put in the work effectively if you don't care. Everybody works differently. Every team I've been on works differently together in terms of culture and the collective personalities that are on it. And you need to tap into that and consider that as you're managing and motivating people.
Definitely. And it comes back to being curious, right? In order to understand people a little better. Can you leave us with one final piece of advice or a lesson that you learned a little earlier in your career that still influences your approach to your job today?
Yeah. It may sound silly, but it's persevere. Don't give up, especially in marketing. You get a lot of feedback. A lot of it isn't good. Sometimes it is. Everybody has opinions about what you should be doing, how you should be doing it better. It's very easy to get discouraged or to feel like you're drowning in those situations, but trust what you're doing. Like especially if you've been working in marketing for a while, you know your stuff, you know what you're doing. Always rely on the data to help you back up what you're saying, but it's be confident, be persevere through that, be the expert that you are, because other departments and divisions, I don't think deal with quite the same level of feedback and opinion. And you really have to be confident in what you're doing, push things forward. Again, not everything is going to work, and that's okay. Don't get yourself down, but find the things that do and repeat those and measure it and do it again. And I think, if you continue to rely on data, continue to rely on your own expertise, you can push through some of that stuff.
Sure. And be curious, right?
Be curious, and care.
Right. That can be our themes.
Exactly.
For this episode. That's great. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you as we wrap up here?
LinkedIn. I have it open all day, mostly so I can spy on what other companies are doing, but I also read my messages avidly. And yeah, I would love to connect with anybody. If you have any questions for me or ideas, love to chat about that. But yeah, I'm very, very responsive on LinkedIn and love to chat.
Excellent. I will be sure to put your LinkedIn page in the show notes. Matt, thank you so much for being a guest on the Last Word on Product Marketing podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on all the major platforms and check out the YouTube channel for videos. Remember, when sales and marketing are aligned, customer growth is unstoppable. Thanks for joining us.